I got invited to speak here again because I spoke at a few of the other CityJSs and the half stacks. I didn't know that that was my title any longer because that was a talk that I gave a year ago. But I thought, okay, why not revamp it and make something shorter and actually do it differently for this event here. So I want to kick this off by getting you into the right mindset about like what your future as front-end engineers, as JavaScript engineers and other bits are actually could be looking like, because we're all worried right now. For years and years, we've been pampered. We had great salaries. A lot of people asked us for jobs. And then out of a sudden, Google let people go, Meta let people go, Microsoft let people go. And we're all like, OK, what do we do now? And the biggest problem is that people think AI can replace us as front-end developers. Let me start with that. Bullshit. And let me start with it by explaining why that is in the rest of this presentation here. So I loved that tweet the other day, like Copilot always knows exactly what I'm about to do, and it does this automatic completion of like random divs with classes on them. And that's sadly enough, when you teach a machine to look at the web right now for best practices in front-end development, that's probably what's going to happen, because far too many things are generated and not even programmed any longer. So the big question is like, will AI replace the front-end developer? And I've been a front-end developer for 25 years. That sounds sad, but it really is the way. 1996 is when I built my first website because I love the web. And I thought it's my job for the rest of my life. And then in between, I always got asked to become a manager, and then I got promoted to a director and VP, and things happen. But I still think the front-end is the most exciting environment to work with. When you ask me to code something that doesn't have an interface, I'm bored. When you ask me to make it work for everybody out there, I'm getting really excited about that. So a year ago, GPT-4 came out, and that made a massive splash with this demo. It said like, okay, he painted a scribble and say like, make a joke website, insert a joke here, and then press a button, so you will see 2 jokes. The quality of that image is really bad, but that's on purpose because the quality of the code was also shit that it generated. Because this is stupid. This is an app that nobody needs. And if you ever, as a front-end developer, get asked to build something like that, run. Go somewhere else. This is not the stuff that we should be doing. So it then generated some random HTML and a JavaScript that was far too complex for what it's supposed to do. But of course, the press went crazy and said like, oh, you don't need to do anything anymore. And since then, a lot of apps cropped up, a lot of startups cropped up that say like, you can make me a sign-up page for Uber, for Capybara, and it will $1 million thing, and then it generates the code for you. These things always existed. One of my first things I had to battle was somebody saying like, you want that much for a website? My cousin's son has Dreamweaver or front page, he can do it cheaper. And I'm like, let him do it cheaper. I see you in 2 years, and I charge 8 times as much to fix all the stuff that he's broken. And that's the same with these kind of things. They're great for building something, but they're not code. Because web development is not creating a graphical interface or defining a single interaction, like press a button to get a joke. Web development means you publish something on the web. And that means for everybody, independent of location, independent of technology, independent of connectivity, independent of physical ability. Can that person see? Can that person use a mouse? Your job is to deliver content on the web. That's what we do, not to write code that makes us excited because we used every pattern there is in JavaScript. So professional user interfaces, to me, work in dozens of environments. Mobile phone, tablet, fridge, your dog with an implant. I don't know. The web runs on everything, so you actually have to make sure that your stuff works there as well. They allow for user customization. A lot of people out there need to change your website to their needs. They might to change it to, or your app even to their needs. They might to change it to a dark mode. They have to bump up the font size. They have to turn off images. They have to turn off animations. And your application should do that. A machine telling me this is an interface will not think about these things because it wasn't asked to think about these things. They will also favor the most important interactions. If you turn off JavaScript, if your connectivity is crap, Google is still a search box because that's how they make money. You type things in, they show you random ads to what you searched for rather than results that you wanted. That's how search came to be by now. But the most important interactions are the things you should start first with and then add the nice to haves on top of it. Why do people use your app? Why do people use your web application? And you add more convenience when it is possible. So the search now shows me images, shows me video previews, these kind of things. But the search still worked. I got something back from the web. So what makes a developer a good developer? And to me, it's actually a focus on the end user and the final product, not actually your own convenience. Professional development to me means not blocking anyone out. Think about what can break. Think about security implications. Think about performance implications in everything you do. Then you don't have to do it 4 months later when somebody found it in the wild. Making sure that people's data is safe. That's another big thing that people forget about. It's great to set up a website, but where does the data go? Is it encrypted? Does that data from ChatGPT come from somewhere that you don't even know that you can't use? And dealing with unknown content. I always like it when people say like, this will be always 3 words in that headline. And we have 400 pixel space for that headline. I always translated them back to German and send it to them and say like, well, if the German words fit, then you have a chance that everything fits, but it's still a bad idea to limit anything on the web. So delivering experience as fast and convenient as possible to our end users. And this is something we have forgotten. We have these great tooling in browsers. I was the product manager for the Edge developer tools in Chromium, which I actually shared with Google. You have all the insights about performance in those things and many, many acronyms that I have no idea what they mean, like glass contentful paint and whatever and so on and so forth. But we think about it after we build the thing. We optimize for performance after we build the thing rather than thinking about performance up front. But we are actually very excited about making it convenient for us as developers to build something fast. That's something we optimized for. And I call that the hype-driven focus in development. Californians, Americans, and people in the cool Silicon Valley love their hustle. They love developers have to build something fast and be always on shipping and be doing things out there. If you're not releasing code, you're not a developer. And then you start working for somebody like Siemens or Deutsche Bank, and you basically have a half-year review of every code that you do. And then you realize this software actually runs the world, not the startup from Silicon Valley, but the cache points that run on Windows XP still. They do, sadly enough. These are the things that actually somebody had to code as well and to maintain. So I think it started with jQuery, write less, do more. And write less, do more to me always means like write something, depend on 10,000 dependencies so you don't have to write a lot, and you do a lot by having these dependencies in your in your development chain back then. So when I worked on Firefox back then, people were like, oh, jQuery was like the biggest thing right now. Why isn't jQuery in the browser? Why do you do that stupid JavaScript thing that is actually standardized? We should have jQuery in the browser. If we had jQuery in the browser now, it would be a security, performance, and actually maintenance problem, because we couldn't, anything you put in the browser, you can never take out again. Browsers cannot break the web. So the hype back then, not a good idea to put it in there. Always be shipping. The other day was a big discussion on, I'm not going to call it X, because I'm going to call it 10, you know, the Latin 10. About, what's it called? The wind thing, CSS, Tailwind, excellent. And how people say like that their separation of concerns is not necessary, it's actually stupid, it makes sense to paint with CSS. And there was a huge discussion about this, and one of the first answers was somebody like, when somebody questioned Tailwind and its usefulness, he's like, well, you're not a person who ships a lot. And I'm like, seriously, this is your focus? Like, release random shit into the wild and hope it works? That's really a weird thing. Like, could always be shipping is of course important. That's the Agile Manifesto. Have something at the end of the day that works. But releasing a product and then having your end users test it for you or find the failures in the live product, that to me that sounds fishy. Iterate often, things will break and that's okay. No, they're not okay. Somebody trusted your product with their credit card details. Somebody trusted their product to get them where they need to be because they want to go to a hospital and don't know where to find it. So breaking things in public, in the open web, is a failure for everybody involved in the product, not the end user. They're not to blame. Know everything just well enough to deliver a product. That's always another thing that I love. Like people are like, oh, I just played with it and oh cool, the interface is there, so obviously that works, right? and you don't know what the interface is. Is it 10,000 diffs? Is it something in the background running there that you don't know? Now Chrome shows you the memory consumption of every single tab since last week. It's quite amazing to look at what these things do, and you're like, it can even max out an M2 here. It's amazing. Think in components, not in products. Like a lot of people, like, I don't want to understand CSS because I only build components. And I build the component that everybody else will use. Doesn't matter if there's 12 NPM modules with the same name that do almost the same thing that yours does, but you think in components. And developer productivity is better than user experience. And that's something that I didn't like for a long, long time, but it's something that we focused on because everybody thought developers are expensive, let's make their life as easy as possible so we don't have to pay them by the hour. And you know who's always was known for always be shipping and high efficiency, being very highly efficient and cheap as workers? Construction workers. They only concentrated on one component at a time. They shipped all the time. And what were they replaced with? Robots. And that's something that can happen to us as well. If we don't take pride in our job, if we don't take pride in what we build and understand the things that we do before we ship them, we can be replaced by AI. If we are an expert that knows their stuff and loves their job, then we cannot be replaced by AI. I've been doing this for such a long time, and it has fascinated me that the craft thing was always something that people said, I'm going to do that when I have time. I was a professional JavaScript developer for 6 years. I got good money because I was one of the few that could do it back then, like 1998, 1999. And then I wrote my first JavaScript book. And I realized that I know nothing. I realized that I just randomly put JavaScript in there, hope it didn't break, and hope nobody realizes that it doesn't break, that it breaks. And then when I wrote the book, I ended up understanding JavaScript. And then I worked on JavaScript engines, and then I worked on browsers after that. Teaching others is the best way to learn something because you cannot fake it any longer. You have to understand it yourself. And people are ruthless in asking questions if you don't know something. So yes, AI will take your jobs, my jobs. Boring, repetitive jobs. Jobs that don't need to be done by developers. Slideware, vaporware, prototypes, marketing horse shit, all the things that we have to do. My company right now, we're a PHP backend. I felt like I'm back in Yahoo. This is amazing. And the rest is Webflow. And people just build the websites themselves, and then we run a script over it to see if it created something horrible. But we ended up like, no, actually, if it's just a job ad that a company wants to have there, I don't need a web developer to build that job ad. The marketing person should type that thing in and hope nothing breaks when they hit enter in the middle of a screen, in the middle of a link. Web scraping and data cleanup and SEO and marketing content, as I call it. And you know what? Good riddance. I don't want to do that stuff, and neither should you. Nobody should build these websites that are for the bin. Nobody should build the first MVP prototype because we know we're going to bin it when the company gets bought by another company, and then basically our code base will be gone. So how can we use AI as developers to make us more efficient and to make us more secure against that world out there? Now, ChatGPT, everybody's super excited about it. A lot of people start learning with ChatGPT, and that worries me. Because conversational UI, like chatting with something, has quite a few issues. The results are only as good as the questions. You ask the right question, you get a proper result. You ask the wrong question, you get random stuff. And the biggest problem is that these conversational UIs are Californian. They don't want to say no. They just, when they don't know the answer, they just give you random stuff and hope it sticks. It's a bit like in meetings with people there as well. It's absolutely fascinating that, like, if the machine says no, it's a failure. No, it just didn't find an answer. It's time consuming. We think it's great to talk for 15 minutes with a chatbot, but then we realized we could have had that as a web result if the web search would give us these results any longer and not random ads. That'd be a great thing. Find, P-H-I-N-D, is a code search engine. Use that one instead of Google or Bing. I don't work for Microsoft anymore, so I don't have to advertise Bing. There's no reliable attribution. You don't know where the code came from or if it's actually copyrighted. It just gives you code. And that's like copying and pasting from Stack Overflow and hoping everything is okay. And quality control is based on the flimsy idea of the final interaction being correct. So when you talk to a chat system that is not a fixed model, and basically you don't talk to it anymore. It assumes that was the right answer and upvotes that answer for the next user. That's like having an argument with your partner and you're like, is everything okay? Yeah, everything's okay. No, there should be another question. You probably, that was not the end of that conversation. It just sounded like it. So AI chatbots are shifty. Look at those bastards. You can't trust them. That they're actually, they want to do the right thing and they actually are seen as this cool innovation right now, so they can't be wrong. AI chatbots rely on a lot of information converted into an ML model. And this is very intensive, this is very expensive, and this is very, very hard to do. So you have hardly any insight of what was indexed and if it was actually okay to do so. Was it the best Stack Overflow answer? Was it a GitHub repo from a company that hoped nothing breaks? We don't know, and we have no attribution. We don't see where it came from. No information how the quality was assessed. Was it the main crowd pleaser? The first answer on Stack Overflow is always the easiest and obvious. Senior developers know that the fourth answer is probably the one that you want to have. And best trick, if you don't want to do the chatbot or you want to get a good answer on Stack Overflow, just post something wrong and let people tell you that you're wrong. You get so many more answers than when you ask a question. It's really, really good. Building, weighing, and querying these models is very expensive. That's why they're outdated. A lot of the stuff, the free tiers, for example, are sometimes 2 to 3 years old. And when you look at new API calls, for example, or new web APIs, they don't know about them because it's an old model. So chatbot-generated code is very likely to have a few things. Reference outdated techniques. The crowd pleaser from, 5 years ago, people still opted for like table layouts because Hacker uses in table layouts. They give the easy answer, not the best. That was always the problem with W3 schools as well. W3 schools is really good in SEO. It gives you an answer that sounds very clever, but it's actually just a lookup in a dictionary. You might as well have read a book and read it up there. It doesn't tell you the why, it just tells you the how. And that's not a good way of learning. They're not usable as you don't know the license or where the data came from. And that is, of course, when you start working in a very professional environment and you actually have to know the license and you just copy ChatGPT stuff in there, you might actually get sued and your code will never go to live. There might be a performance, security, and compliance issue. And regardless of that, though, lots of code is already and will be AI generated. It will not go away. It's the biggest hype right now. It was very interesting to see that last week when OpenAI announced that they're doing like PDF reading, image generation, all the things directly in ChatGPT of OpenAI. That killed a lot of startups. You know, like, you're not a startup, you're a plugin for ChatGPT. And if ChatGPT ever goes away, you have a problem. And a lot of people have that right now. So let's shift the focus of us in general from writing code to reviewing code, because that's a normal thing in every job that we have, in our careers that we have. We have these principal, lead, senior, and junior developers, and the amount of code that you write is actually getting less and less the more you get high up the chain. As a junior developer, you write a lot of code, you make a lot of mistakes, that's good too because you learn from that. As a senior developer, you're more likely to review what junior developers have done. As a lead developer, you define best practices for the whole team. And as a principal, you sit in meetings and give PowerPoints to other presenters and other principals. Whereas the amount of reviews is actually much more the higher you go up. You review the junior developer code, you review the team code, you define actually the best practices for the whole team. So now with AI generating code, the question is like, will the junior developer role go away? Who teaches the junior developers? Will it just be ChatGPT? Or will it be something that we don't need junior developers anymore? So understanding code, understanding the impact of your code, what it does, is becoming a much more important role for us as developers, because a lot of boring stuff can get generated and we don't need to do anything about that. So what do? We should use AI systems as professional developers, but in context. Not go to ChatGPT and ask it, how do I center a div? This has been solved. It's not a joke anymore. But these systems, these copilots or Code Whisperer or Replit or whatever Google calls it, they're more than automated copy and paste, because that's what the first ones did. Like I go to Stack Overflow, I copy the first answer, I change some numbers around. If nothing explodes, I've built a product. And this is what ChatGPT did. It did that lookup in GitHub or in Stack Overflow for me. But it also recognized the context, especially GitHub Copilot. I worked a lot with them. When you have several tabs open with code, the auto-completion will take these other tabs into consideration. It will also take the workspace that you have open in consideration to give you auto-completion according to the rest of the code that's open around it. ChatGPT doesn't have that, doesn't know anything about the context around it. Style recognition and mimicking. So the more I use GitHub Copilot, the more it actually wrote code the way I write code. And this is the easiest way to get developers more effective because I don't have to write that by hand. Code explanation. I can actually highlight a bit of code and say, like, what does this do? And it's probably code from myself 5 weeks ago that I haven't documented, but it's really, really good to have that functionality in there. Code translation, if you want to learn a new language and you just turn your JavaScript into Python and you just get to know the other language that way a bit, another good idea. And the results get better the more you use it. The machine learns from you the more you use it. So that's another interesting bit. So the biggest bit is auto-completion. You just write a function name and it generates the code for you, and then you start reviewing. That's what you do there. You can also do it bit by bit, line by line, and then you actually see like when it's going in the wrong direction and tell it not to do that. There's also code referencing, which is a bit of a new thing in Copilot. So if you have code that's actually copyrighted or is used somewhere, it tells you actually this is from this repository and this comes with this license. So you should not be using that in your MIT product if it's actually a GPL one. Code creation via prompt, that's the Command I or Control I shift shortcut. So if you go, it goes inside your code and then you can write a prompt and it generates the code in there, and it uses the diff view to make sure you review it before the code gets actually in there. Again, forcing you into that review mode as a developer rather than just hoping the stuff is right. GitHub code actions via chat, so I can also use the command, highlight something, do Command I again, and say like, explain this code for me, or document that code for me, or write comments for me, and then it actually starts explaining what that code does in a chat window without you leaving your editor. And that's the most important thing. Stay in the professional environment that you're in, and actually use AI tools in there. Don't jump between tools all the time, because your brain doesn't like that. We don't like going other places and then coming back. The crucial step in all of that is, though, to use your IDE to do the validation and linting. So the generated code, in this case, that's the last thing I worked on in Microsoft, the DevTools for Code. You see the squiggly lines under the image here and says like, hey, this must have an alternative text. So your editor then takes the generated code and tells you what's wrong about it. And that's live as well. So while you're typing, it tells you when something goes wrong. People hate ESLint, hate CSSLint because it's so strict with you. But you know what? It's better to be strict with you than having end users have a bad experience. So what about quality and relevance? I love that there's Copilot for docs. So that one has the official documentation for GitHub, for React, for Playwright, for MDN, and so on and so forth. And you can use a chat interface to actually read the docs, so to say, or interact with the docs. And my favorite bit is that it allows you to filter it and say like, I know this material already, I just forgot what the syntax was. I'm a new developer, I'm an intermediate developer, or I'm an expert. I want a balanced response. Teach me something with that, or just give me the facts. And when you do that, you can do that with prompting as well if you know how to type it. But I love that they just put some sliders in there to make it easy for you to get the right results. And once you actually then started, in this case, talking to MDN, and you can actually say like, how do I, fetch API? And then it actually gives you a chat answer. And it gives you on the side these references. So there you see where in the official documentation that information came from. So it's a bit like a citation in Wikipedia, making sure that this is the information that comes back. And if your documentation is on GitHub as Markdown, you can use Copilot for docs for your own documentation as well. So this, to me, is a great time to be a developer who cares about users, as we can automate all the boring bits. Think about the quality of your code. Think about the experience of your end users. And integrated AI experiences augment the work of humans. They don't replace them. We become better experts by having AI do the boring stuff for us. You don't become an expert by asking AI. That's not how it works. And if anybody tells you that in a job interview, run. Also, I'm hiring, so if anybody wants to be a DevRel working for me in Berlin or in Austria, I'm doing that as well. Learning to code will get you a job, but learning the craft and understanding the impact of your code will make your career. You will take that with you, and you will have to have a career after a while. You will move up, and the most important thing is understanding the impact of your code. And that's all I had, so whatever you do, do it with style and do it with fun. Thank you very much.